So back in 2020, I did a video on universal basic income and the likelihood of it coming to Canada because we had a number of, well, a number. We did an experiment in Ontario with universal basic income. That was under the previous Liberal government for Ontario, and once the new government came in, they canceled that. So I don't know how much data they actually collected from that process to, for it to actually be of any use. But going forward, I think it is interesting that we're going to continue to have this discussion probably on a federal level, which is probably where it needs to be had anyways. And I think it's interesting for a number of reasons because we have seen this pilot program take place in other countries and it has been a failure. And I think one of the reasons that it's failed is because it's the I think so when the idea was initially pitched by I guess some economists back in the day, one of the things that they said it has to be done that has to be done with it is it has to be done in isolated, so there can't be any other programs that it's in conjunction with, and so there's no other poverty programs that it's in conjunction with. And I think we just don't do that because it's tough to do. How do you know which one's going to be the most effective? Which is going to be a most effective program? Because right now we have this we kind of try to target specific issues and give money based on that. But I think one of the issues with that approach is we end up with a lot of gaps. So a lot of people will end up in or put themselves in worse situations so that they can continue to fit into a particular program, even though that's going to be detrimental to the long term, financial health or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, financial development. Because some of these programs are absolutely terrible in the way that they've been designed, and I don't think that they really tried to make any changes, any improvements. A lot of the programs are like more like poverty traps than anything. They don't really they not really necessarily designed to assist people through a program, through a process to get them back on track. But a lot of the time, what happens is people end up in these situations and they don't get out of them, and that's it. And then we might end up with a continuation of that from one generation to another. Very unfortunate, very sad, and that's not what we want, right? We want people to be able to become their full selves in a sense, not to become very, like philosophical with it, but the idea is for them to be able to develop themselves so that they're fully uh well, fully independent in a sense, right? So that they can earn their own income. They don't have to be dependent on anybody else, well, specifically the government, to provide, right? So that, I think, is the point. Now, not everybody will be able to provide for themselves, and that's why we have something like a universal basic income, is to support people in that position. Now, one of the ways some people want to implement it and is really focusing on that word universal and providing that sum of money to everyone regardless of their income, right? Which is understandable because how at what point would you say somebody no longer requires that income? I mean, it's going to be a like a sweet spot where you get both the income from your work and you can maximize the income from the universal or the UBI if we do it in such a way that we're like old age security, where we have a clawback. The more money you make, the less money you would be eligible for through the UBI program. That's one way of doing it. There's a number of different ways of doing it, and the one of the big issues is that it's an incredibly expensive idea. And if you look at replacing the entire budget like just the entire budget, all the money that we spend with a UBI program, what will end up, I mean, we still end up spending more money, right? So there's a lot of questions to be had or to be asked. So hopefully they actually go through a process of discovery to see if this is something that's worth entertaining, if something that's even feasible. And yeah, I just kind of go from there. But I feel like this, everything, especially right now, is just incredibly political. Like, I don't know what the point is. Just have the conversation, present the merits, present the I guess the demerits or the potential pitfalls and negative aspects of it, and then go from there. Either it makes sense and it's something that we should be implementing on a national level in some way, shape, or form, or it doesn't make sense and we shouldn't be doing it. But if we don't have that discussion, it's just always going to be bubbling under the surface, right? And I think it's been bubbling for long enough, so it looks like it's coming to the main stage here. So delegates to virtual policy convention also back national pharmacare and a Green New Deal. Liberal delegates endorse the universal basic income, reject capital gain tax hike. Well, this was just, you know, that one was never getting. That's not going anywhere. The thing is, there's a political reality that needs to be understood as well. Some things will just never go through. This, like Canadians love their real estate. That Canadians keep a majority of their wealth in their real estate. We're not saying it's good or a bad thing. It's just what it is. So a capital gain tax on your primary residence, when so many people are thinking of using their primary residence as their retirement fund, they'll take that as something just punitive, right? Why are you punishing me for buying my home, for owning my home, for paying paying everything off, and now you want to tax me on the gain that I have benefited from. People are accommodating with a lot of other taxes, but it just seems like that one is political suicide and it's not going to get touched. So let's go through the article and see what's going on. So liberal delegates to the party's policy convention have overwhelmingly endorsed a resolution calling for the establishment of a universal basic income UBI in Canada, while also rejecting a call to hike the capital gains tax. Interesting. I wonder how they're proposing to pay for a UBI. By a vote of 77%, Liberal members on hand for the policy plenary today backed a call to permanently implement an income program similar to Canada Emergency Response Benefit (CERB), which kept millions of people afloat with monthly checks during the first wave of the pandemic. With 8.7% of Canadians living below the poverty line and thousands more struggling to make ends meet, backers of this policy say a UBI would ensure that communities at risk, including Indigenous peoples, are able to feel financially secure. Given the success of the CERB program, a UBI will assist seniors and low-income Canadians maintain an adequate standard of living, regardless of working status, the resolution reads. Speaking to delegates assembled online, Alex Spears of the Young Liberals of Canada said a UBI would ensure the country's strong and robust social safety net is adapted to the 21st century, adding that a program to send checks to all families is completely consistent with our values as a party. He said the program would put more cash in the hands of working Canadians and families and could lift millions out of poverty. Millions out of, yeah, okay. Um, below the 8.7% below the poverty line. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, okay. So UBI is not a silver bullet, and it ought to be done in conjunction with many other progressive policies, but it is a critical step. Yeah, I mean, I just don't like. I don't like it how it phrasing it that way. I don't understand why it needs to be phrased that way. All we would have to say is universal basic income is an option that we should look at because it might produce the kind of results that we're looking at producing with our programs, right? Well, the major thing, what we're looking to do is alleviate poverty, eliminate poverty. And this is a potential option for doing that. We should study it, we should look into it and see if it can actually do what we hope it will do. What what we hope all these other programs would have done but haven't yet, to the point where we still have 8.7% of Canadians living below the poverty line, which is what, close to 3 million, or what is that, around 3 million Canadians? That's quite a few, right? I mean, that's what's the population of the GTA? It's like what, 5, 6 million? That's almost half the population of GTA across Canada. But you spread that across Canada, that's a lot of folks. Now, obviously, one of the things is too, though, you don't necessarily require to have this, you don't necessarily need to have the same income in one place as you do with in another. So I guess it also depends on exactly what that means in terms of what that poverty line is. Because I mean, obviously, if you're living out east, you don't necessarily need the same income to maintain a good manner of living as you would in the GTA core, right? So, anyways, would a UBI work? The resolution does not say how such a costly program would be designed and implemented. Few jurisdictions around the world have successfully enacted programs that make regular payments to all citizens without means tests or work requirements. Exactly it. That is exactly it, right? Because the worry is, well, first of all, you don't have enough. We don't have enough money to just hand out to everybody, so we would want to means test it, and then also we don't want it to be a trap for people and to remain in poverty, right? So you would want to build out some sort of work requirement for those who are capable of working. But they also mentioned up here though is that they didn't want to have any work requirements though, something of that nature, right? Regardless of working status. Yeah. So I don't know. That seems something. This seems like they want to implement something that's directly in contradiction of previous evidence. But I mean, again, it's just these are just ideas that they're putting on the table. They're not. I mean, that's when the actual work gets done is for people to put together a working policy. The parliamentary budget officer last week concluded that a universal basic income could also have Canada's poverty rate in just 1 year, but at a steep cost, $85 billion in 2021 to 2022, rising to $93 billion in 2023. Oh, sorry, 2025 to 2026. So while the resolutions are non-binding, the government ignored a 2018 convention vote to decriminalize all illicit drug use. For example, the policy endorsements could help inform future government spending and the Liberal Party's platform. The government has said it's preparing to spend $100 billion this year in to kickstart the post-pandemic economy, even after it's reported a record high deficit of $381 billion in the last fiscal year. Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to live with that. Like we're not getting out of that. While the idea of a UBI has gained traction in progressive circles, supporters maintain the massive price tag of such a program could offset could be offset by dismantling existing provincial social welfare programs. Academics who study poverty exactly. That's exactly what I was saying before. Like the idea is that you would have to remove a lot of these other programs. Yeah, I guess that would be interesting. How would that work? So maybe the individual provinces would manage it. They'll get funded by the federal government, something like the way that the healthcare system works. And each province has their own UBI program that they'll be managing. I think that could make sense. So yeah. So a 529-page report authored by researchers at the University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser University, and the University of Calgary concluded after a 3-year investigation that a basic income for all is not the best way to address poverty and other social problems. Instead, the report said governments should boost existing social support programs for vulnerable groups through improved disability assistance, dental care programs, and more money to help the working poor pay rent. A more targeted approach to help the disadvantaged, as opposed to a universal program like UBI, would do more to lift people out of poverty, the report concluded. I don't see how that's possible. Because I think one of the issues is just having so many different programs to navigate. I mean, it has its own cost and increases the level of complexity for the user. Now they have to manage a number of different programs on their own, as well as for the system itself. Like we create a web of agencies and a web of just all of these institutions, additional institutions that need to be serviced, and I mean the cost will continually go up as well. So why wouldn't we streamline that as much as possible? I really like I don't and this is the thing. Like, I'm a very when it comes to reports and all that kind of stuff, 100% I'll never go through that 529 page report, but I disagree. I disagree with their assessment because it doesn't. It just like on the face of it doesn't make sense. I mean, maybe they made it 529 pages, so they force you to read the whole thing in order to be able to say that like how can you disagree? You didn't read the report. I'm sorry, but you're telling me that giving somebody giving somebody money and maybe providing assistance on how to manage that money would be less effective than a series of programs that don't give them money but help them manage specific aspects of their life. I don't know. I don't know. That doesn't really pass the test to me. Like just as a saying common sense, right? That doesn't really make any sense. So instead, yeah, I mean, boosting social support I mean, like how much money goes into all of that stuff that could just be funneled right into this one program? And I mean, you gotta at some point you gotta just be like, I don't know, maybe we have social workers that actually know how to manage money, and they can be targeted for the folks that are on these programs. So maybe they have to attend classes or something like that, so we can help them build out the skills required to manage themselves and to, improve their lives so they're no longer dependent on the system. I just can't see like you. I think you can build something like that out. You can build a streamlined process to move people through that system. I don't think you can really do that by having a number of different programs. Like you're just adding to the complexity of the whole problem. Anyways, that's just my thoughts. I'm just kind of ranting. Conservative MP Ed Fast, the party's finance critic, said pursuing a UBI would be a risky and unknown experiment that will leave millions more Canadians behind. Based on what? What do you mean millions more Canadians behind? What does that even mean? Behind on what? I mean, if you're giving them money, what are they behind on? I mean, are you saying specifically that it might be creating inflation, which might leave people behind because they can't keep up with the rising costs? What do you mean by leaving people? That's such a vague statement. It's absolutely meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. I don't even know why politicians bother opening their mouths. It's like you just want to say something for the sake of saying it. So he said the Liberal Party is trying to reimagine the Canadian economy while the country is still struggling with the pandemic. I really don't think it's that much of a reimagining. I mean, to reorganize the benefits already being provided in a way that's streamlined and more effective, is that not a good thing? Like maybe it's not. Maybe it won't be a good thing. I'm not saying it necessarily is, but don't you have to think a little? No, I'm not saying outside the box, but you got to be. Why should this be one area in which innovation should not touch? Is my question. If there's a better way to help people out of poverty and not just manage themselves while they're impoverished, why would we not want to pursue that? Doesn't make any sense to me. It's just like you have a list of talking points and you're just trying to go off of the go off of the points, regardless of what's being said to you. The fact that UBI was supported at the convention this weekend is for the course with Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. Instead of focusing on creating jobs, they have fixated on implementing risky, expensive, and untested economic policies. Well, that whole 2020 was an experience of risky, expensive, and untested policies, but we did it anyways. So I'm not, and that's not to say we shouldn't be doing. That's not to say we necessarily should be implementing it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having the discussion around it. And really, so the question I always like to look at, because I like to tie this back into real estate, right? What would this do for real estate prices, right? How would, because the question becomes, what would be required to now get a house? Because this would increase the number of people that can now bid up prices on the lower end, depending on how it's implemented. Like now, if we only have people to say you make less than $50,000 a year, and there's some sort of clawback, right? So nobody can end up making more than $55,000 a year or something like that with this program, just to say. And I mean that could just be enough for people to rent. Would that create more demand for rentals? Yes, I mean, where would people I guess they would have I think what might happen actually is that people would have more flexibility to move to areas that are probably more accommodating where the money can go a little bit further. They don't necessarily have to be around all the other resources. So maybe we can, yeah, so maybe it would actually help with the development of other areas because they can become more economically viable. You have a bunch of people in these areas with money that are maybe less expensive areas, and now you need other services to accommodate these people, and you can build out town, all that kind of stuff. So maybe it's not the necessarily the worst, not necessarily the worst idea, but like because that's really the only thing that I'm constantly thinking about is like how do we make areas more viable? How do we get people with money to areas where there's no money? And how do we get them to spend the money in those areas? So we can actually build up places that are outside of the GTA and those main cores. We saw a lot of it happening in 2020 when people were moving outside of these urban cores. You started to see prices in Waterloo, Guelph, all those kind of places. London was on fire, Ottawa, all those places outside of the core, right? Started to jump, and that was fantastic. I mean, not necessarily if you're trying to get into the market, but I mean, I think it's just the idea is that you can now move out to these areas and so live a reasonable life. The fact that the prices jump so much is not necessarily fantastic, but the fact that people are moving to these other areas, I think, is a good thing. Um, but yeah, you guys can't really get one without the other. So the other parts I didn't really necessarily want to go through, but yeah, the other parts I didn't necessarily want to go through. Is more so, well, I guess the inheritance tax, capital gains tax rejected. So at a time when all levels of government are searching for new revenue streams, doing air quotes. Uh, Basically, it's just how can I? Well, you're the revenue streams. Like how can I take more of your money? That's the question. It's like, well, how like they have money. I can't just ask them for more of it directly and say I'm going to take, but how can I take more of your money you know, without being too imposing? That's really the question. So these new revenue streams, oh, the euphemism, I just can't stand it. I really get put off by like that kind of political talk. Currently, when an investment is sold, a stock, a mutual fund, or any other number of other assets, 50% of any increase in the value is taxed as income. For example, if a person, yeah, the capital gains, the preferential tax treatment is designed to encourage people to make investments to drive economic growth and provide companies with easy access to capital. Critics maintain this unfairly benefits the rich. I mean, if I don't know what people want. Like, what? How can you like? People are making money, so it's a bad thing. I don't know. What do you want? Like, if this actually does provide an economic benefit, help drive growth, and provide companies with easy access to capital, if these things are true, then this part shouldn't be true. There should be no critics. If these parts are true, right? No, not saying that you shouldn't um, you shouldn't have a tax, but it's just like, well, it's actually helping to grow. Like you can't, like, if we need to minimize some of the taxes in order to grow, like you can't have just taxes. I don't understand what people want, right? You need to have a mixture of things, right? Some taxes, some social programs, and business. Like we need to have a mixture of things, and a balance is important. I don't know exactly. I don't think we've come up with a perfect balance of these things, but you got to have a little bit of everything, right? So if you want it to grow, so you can't just unfairly benefits the rich. What about people that are trying to they come here, they work really hard, 30, 40 years, they've been slaving away 30 years, there's 20, 30 years, whatever it is. They've been slaving away for to get a piece of that Canadian dream, and then they want to sell the thing that they've been working on, and now they're a rich person. But I mean, would you say that they're undeserved of the money that they would be receiving from that? They're not deserving of the wealth. I don't know. Maybe that's just how they think. I think those people are just probably just jealous. Anyways, the Ontario chapter proposed reducing the capital gains tax exemption to zero, meaning all investments would be taxed as income. As part of the same proposal, the Ontario, like these people, I don't know, pitch an inheritance tax on all assets over 2 million. I mean, like anyways, that proposal did not specify the rate at which these assets. This is did not specify the rate. This is why I think a lot of this stuff is just not serious. I think they're just saying things to have a laugh, just talk about whatever, just joke with each other. This is not a. I'm asking everyone, please make me pay more taxes. I want to pay my fair share. I didn't think anybody was stopping him from giving money. Jake Lando? Is somebody actually stopping you from giving money to the government? Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize there was a maximum amount of money you're allowed to bequeath to the government. I was unaware of this. Oh man, like somebody should reach out to Jake and let him to see if there's a way for him to give more money to the government. Maybe there's a bunch of assets or something that he can sell, and so that way he can just give it whatever he like everything that he has to the government, and that's it. I'm a little confused. I didn't realize that. I really did not know that. Um, he should have a conversation about that. So another delegate named Linda, who also did not give her last name, um, said, wait, what? Who also didn't give their last name? Anyways, she said worries that a change to the capital gains tax might open the door to federal government taxing the sale of primary residences. Interesting. In the last, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they're part of the same party, but look, that's just it's a big thing. You can't win an election with that. Right now, sales of primary homes, yeah, and you know what? I'm gonna end it there. But I thought that was really neat. Just getting an idea of where the conversation is at, because really I think it's the Liberal Party that's having most of the conversation. I was hoping that it would be a little bit more specific, a little bit more substantive, you know, have some more substance to it. But it is what it is. You can't expect too much from politicians. But anyways, I'm gonna bring that to a close. And but please let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think this is something that we're hurtling towards? What models, what UBI models have you seen that interest you? Which ones do you think um, might be viable, right? What do you think we should test here, if anything? If you don't like the UBI, why don't you like it? What do you think it would be better? Do you think the current hodgepodge of and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's just, like the mixture, having a mixture of different benefits and all that. Do you think this is the best way, is the way we're currently doing it, or do you think there's a superior way, but just not the UBI way? Anyways, let me know in the comments. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I was going to describe like, share, and subscribe if you felt like this content was of any value to you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day. All right, take care.